as Secretary of Defense, I am here in person to make something crystal clear. America's support for Israel is ironclad. Now, this is no time for neutrality or for false equivalence or for excuses for the inexcusable. There is never any justification for terrorism.
And for more on the diplomatic efforts around this war, senior foreign affairs editor Rob Parsons joins us here in the studio. Rob, a huge mission here being undertaken by Austin and Blinken. What's the likelihood of success?
Well, frankly, I don't think there's any great chance of success if the aim is the release of the hostages. But certainly it's one of the central conversations that Antony Blinken has been having with King Abdullah in Jordan and will be having today with the authorities in Qatar. Qatar particularly important in this regard because it's been one of the main suppliers and backers of Hamas over the last decade, somewhere in the region of $1 billion worth of assistance to Hamas. So Antony Blinken will be hoping that he will be able to persuade officials in Qatar to use their influence with Hamas to seek the release, the unconditional release, as he's putting it, of all those hostages. How much influence Qatar still has over the situation, though, remains to be seen, given the fact that the situation is so tense and that the Israeli authorities seem almost certain now to launch a ground offensive. It would appear unlikely that they have very much influence. The Hamas officials have themselves made clear that they won't release any hostages until the fighting is over. So it doesn't leave an awful lot of room for manoeuvre. Other areas that they've been discussing, first of all with King Abdullah II in Jordan, was the possibility of opening humanitarian corridors for refugees in Gaza. There does seem to be some hope of progress in that area. King Abdullah obviously very concerned that this should not lead to another mass exodus of refugees from Gaza to countries like his own and to Egypt, which have had to take on millions of refugees, Palestinian refugees, in the past. So there does seem to have been some progress made in that area with the two countries, Jordan and the United States, discussing with the ICRC and with United Nations relief organizations the possibility of setting up relief camps inside Gaza itself, or perhaps just across the border in Egypt as well.
Another big international concern here is that this conflict could spread inside the region. This especially concerning Israel trading fire with Hezbollah militants in Lebanon right now. What's the situation there?
Yeah, obviously the situation's very tense, and I would imagine that Antony Blinken will be calling on Arab leaders to use whatever influence they have with Hezbollah to persuade them not to get involved in this conflict on the side of Hamas. The fear will be that if Israel, as it appears to be at the moment, is absolutely intent on crushing Hamas and launches an offensive which seems to be making progress, that Hezbollah will really have to think very seriously about whether to get involved or not. Hezbollah will be loath to see Hamas crushed. But on the other hand, as it's been making clear itself over the last few days, despite the fact that there have been cross-border incidents, exchanges of artillery fire, Hezbollah has its own agenda, which is not necessarily tied to that of Hamas. So Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, Naim Qassem, his number two, who've been speaking over the last 24 hours about the situation, clearly very concerned and want to show that they are engaged to a degree at least with Hamas, but don't want to be sucked, I think, at this stage into the conflict unless it can be avoided. There is clearly a risk, however, I was suggesting, that if Israel really does seem on the verge of crushing Hamas, that Hezbollah may get involved. I think it could be fair to say that the people of southern Lebanon do not want that to happen. They've already been leaving in large numbers from the border areas. And the threat of possible US engagement with that naval fleet just off the coast of Lebanon is something that clearly Hezbollah would have to take very seriously as well.
So many very delicate moving parts here, Rob. Thank you for helping us make sense of it.